met everybody in other sessions except for Catalina. So Catalina, my name is Jackie Pope, and where I fit within MITT is I manage academic development in the Center for Learning and Innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's our team that has been arranging the training for the past couple of weeks. So that's a big part of our job, is to support instructors. And we also are involved with if the institution is doing any new program development or redeveloping existing programs, we also assist with that. So that's who we are. I work very closely with Courtney Dick and Cynthia Costa. They're two of our educational developers, so you may have met them in other sessions.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited about having Peggy French join us today. This is the second time that we've offered this session. And Peggy has also done another session for us in how to preparing for your first online class. So Peggy had the unique experience 10 years ago of leading her institution, Mohawk College, through the same process that MITT is going through now. So they transitioned to a blended learning institution 10 years ago. And so we have learned a lot from Peggy, her experiences, and we wanted to be able to share some of those lessons with all of you, and also to give you a sense of what do we mean by blended learning and what are the benefits of that way of delivering our programs at MITT. So Peggy comes with many years of experience. She's taught all ages, she's taught in many modalities, and we're really, really happy to have her working with us. She's going to be working with us on some other initiatives throughout the year. So so with that, I will turn it over to Peggy.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everyone. Again, a huge apology for Wednesday. As I said, I really don't know what happened, but something possessed my computer and I could not do the exorcism fast enough to make it work. So I apologize. I am recording this session, but I'm only recording my piece of it. And then when we get to the question piece, I'll stop. I didn't want to stop any free flow discussion. So we won't capture your discussions. We'll just capture the general presentation in case anyone wants to review it again, or if someone couldn't make it today, they can at least get a sense of what happened. So I'm going to go off video and I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Probably about half an hour with half an hour or so for questions. So, and Jackie will help keep me on time. I can go on tangents, and Friday afternoons are tough. So we'll see. She'll rope me back in when needed, I'm sure. Okay, so let's share my screen. Share. Okay. And ideally, you see the best of both worlds blended learning. And I'm doing this in H5P, which is just an ed tech tool that I quite love. So we'll take you through that. And you can see any questions about the tool or the content, anything in question period is fair game. So our agenda for today, it seems a little strange, but I'm going to take it back to the very definitions of a few key terms that come up in blended learning, because what we found at Mohawk College, my home base here just outside of Toronto in Ontario, if you're not speaking the same language, there's a lot of hurdles you have to overcome. And we had hurdles between faculty and students, faculty and admin, and a lot of that came down to we didn't share the same language. We weren't communicating using the same language. So we want to nip that in the bud right away, make sure we have a common language. Research roundup, just very brief research of blended learning, just kind of to prove that it's not a COVID thing. It's been around a long time. We're going to really focus on the boost to learners, kind of the how and some examples, and the boost of blended learning to you as an educator, and that in terms of educator empowerment, and it really can empower you as an educator. And then your questions. So not a complicated agenda. We'll take it nice and easy for a Friday afternoon. When I say basic communication, I meant basic communication. So at Mohawk, we weren't even understanding that blended learning was the combination of face-to-face and online. So we had people talking about a blended class. The class isn't blended, the program's blended, and the course is either you're either doing that week face-to-face or online. So we had a lot of confusion about blended learning, and blended learning is the combination of face-to-face and online learning. There's no set percentage to that combination, but it's the fact that some of your course content is online. It is not face-to-face. So once we had, and a lot of it was training admin to speak the right language, and then their communication out to students about what blended learning was. So very simple picture. It seems super simple, but we didn't have that right, and that caused a lot of unnecessary communication problems. Other popular terms, these get a little trickier as we go. So the total number of hours for a student to complete a course, including prep and assessments. So the whole idea of student learning hours, which is quite different from the number of contact hours. So we have most of our courses at Mohawk here, they're 3 hours a week for 14 weeks. They're 42 hours. Those are course hours. Those are not student learning hours. So student learning hours and course hours are quite different. So your student learning hours might be, they might be doing 2 hours of prep for every hour in class, which would take it to 126, I guess that would be. It could be at 150, 185, it doesn't matter. You just have to have some sense of the student learning hours for your course. The reason behind that is the most common complaint with blended or online learning is that the regular course gets bloated. And all of a sudden the students are doing 2 times the amount of work or 3 times the amount of work, which not hard to believe. They don't really like that. If they have a friend taking it face-to-face and they're taking it online and they're doing 3 times the amount of work, it's not going to get a great feedback, right? So the idea of a student learning hour, having some sense of that is pretty important. And you won't have that sense now. And I'm going to declare that because in my 10 years of working with my faculty, I have not run into one faculty member who actually knew the student learning hours associated with his or her course. They had no clue. It didn't take them long to come up with a ballpark and have a good sense and range of how long that course should take a student to complete to a decent level, but they don't have it going in. We've got the idea of synchronous learning, where faculty and students are in the same place at the same time, and asynchronous learning, where instruction and learning neither occur in the same place nor the same time. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter and keeping on top of EdTech Twitter, but this has been a huge debate all summer about synchronous learning or asynchronous learning. We've got a lot of faculty at Mohawk too who think they need that connection. So they're doing like 3-hour Zoom sessions with their students, and they're doing it twice a week, and the students are rebelling. They want asynchronous learning, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be. And then your LMS, why is this not wanting to pull over? There we go. Is just your short form for the learning management system. So you're in a Brightspace environment. It's called My Learning. You're going to hear a lot about the LMS. So that common language is kind of important to have. The whole idea of blended learning, it's not tied to COVID. It's not a new strategy. It's actually quite tried and true. Late 1990s, I would say, it kind of took its final form. And then it was really solidified. I don't know if any of you know Curtis Bonk and Graham, but they're big heavy hitters in the blended learning ed tech environment. And over the last decade, it has been rapid adoption. Not as rapid as over this summer, but it has been rapid over the last decade. So basically, an institution goes to blended delivery either to optimize physical space, because they want to take on more students than their set space can allow, or they want to provide that flexible learning opportunity for their students. So of course, we're kind of forced into that second bucket right now, but that's been a main driver for the last decade anyway, for those flexible learning opportunities. A little bit of research on that left. There have been some big meta-analysis of blended learning across North America. I attended, was it in Boston about 8 years ago? It was a conference on blended learning. That's all we talked about. And a lot of the institutions were doing it for disaster planning, which is basically what we're in now, right? So they were getting it in place way back then to have it ready to go. The fact that this online learning blended continuum, it's been ramping up for a long time. And it does make sense if we think about it. So I don't know about MITT. I don't know the whole background of the institution, but I know here we're an access college. So we take a lot of mature students, a lot of people who never expected to go to college. So they're dealing with a lot more than just studying full time. They're trying to find that balance with more claims on their time than ever before. So we have a lot in that sandwich generation where they might have young kids they're taking care of, as well as elderly parents. So that flexible learning works for them and works for their reality. And then the whole idea of the expectations in the workplace changing. So learning how to work and learning how to learn online is a skill. And it's a skill that workplaces more and more would be evaluating highly. So even before the world went crazy in mid-March, this whole blended learning and that continuum moving from face-to-face learning to more blended, it was making sense before it became a necessity. Looking at the boosts for it, so again, really simplifying stuff, we're going to look at a few boosts for learners and then a few boosts for you as educators. So the whole idea, I call it the omni-patient computer. So say you're in your face-to-face classroom and you have your 30 to 40 students. You know they're not all getting it the first time you say it, and you probably rephrase it as you're talking about it, the concept, you rephrase it a few times, but there's likely at least half who still don't get it. Blended learning and having stuff online for them provides those learners who need more time to skill up on concepts. They can practice. The computer's never going to say, I'm sick of you, why don't you just understand this? It will go on forever. And that's why that flipped learning, where those basic concepts are handled in the online environment, and when they come face to face, you're doing those deeper dives, kind of a little more where your expertise comes into play, because that computer can do all that basic concept stuff if you need half an hour to get it, or if you need 2.5 hours to understand it, right? Whereas your face-to-face class time wouldn't have allowed that. It's a great way also to scaffolding or build upon those previous learning, coupled with that feedback to communicate progress that you can't necessarily do for each and every student in the classroom as they're just skilling up on things. Just going to highlight one really nice tool I like for this, just to give you an idea of what I mean. So Quizlet, and it's a free tool. Anyone can use it. What happens is you just take your terms and your definitions, and you can use images and stuff. But it'll give you your basic flashcards. So that's your very low level, like, let's really learn these concepts. I remember doing grade 3 math. I remember doing multiplication or whatever by flashcards. But this one tool then lets you kind of scaffold up. And now, okay, you kind of know your terms. Well, I don't know them, so this is going to be embarrassing. But once you know, you know what? This might be, no, anyway. It lets you, yes, it lets you scaffold up to a little more. Okay, now they have to know a little more, right? They can't just flip. They're not just memorizing, they're actually making connections. So that's a nice little tool, and there's even another level that lets them go up. So they have to do it kind of quickly. So that you can do online. And again, some students are going to do it really quickly and get it really quickly, and others will need to spend some time doing it. Mentioned this briefly before, so that whole idea of the learning aligning with your students' schedules now, so that they can chunk in some information, so they're not looking at a 3-hour lecture they're doing chunks of information, maybe between their jobs or on a lunch break at a job, or after kids go to bed, they can do an hour of work each night, or an hour in the morning, an hour at night. And the whole idea of teaching and learning being 24/7, but you're not there 24/7. You've built your learning environment, and when it's built well, you're still present in that. You just aren't actually present in it. That the learning can still take place 24/7, that they need it to happen. Big here, and I don't think it's quite moved out west quite as much as it is here, but most of our work in Ontario is built around universal design for learning or inclusive design. So the whole idea that you have to build learning environments that engage and support every type of learner. So as you can imagine, through the years, we've learned a lot more about how students learn. We've learned a lot more about accessibility. So UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, is kind of tied to accessibility too. So it's looking at the why of learning, the what of learning, and how of learning, and how to engage all learner types. And it's actually easier when you're blended to engage all those learning preferences and types of learners, because it's a lot easier to extend the learning. So you can build in your online learning environment, you can build extensions to basic concepts that if you're doing them face-to-face, you either don't have time or you've already lost, say, 3/4 of your class. So you can almost challenge your superstars without shaming the non-superstars, if we can. I don't like using that lingo, but you can do that online, because you can build those different pathways a lot easier than you can do that face-to-face. If you can even do it face-to-face, it would be very difficult. So that whole pathways for learning and choice. So that's all around engagement, right? So what engages one type of learner doesn't necessarily engage another. The online facilitates, so the online portion of the blended delivery can facilitate different pathways a lot easier. It's a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. So in terms of multimedia, you can, and UDL is a lot about, okay, I provide a way in, maybe it's by text, but I also provide a way in using multimedia, be it audio, visual. Again, hard to do face-to-face to cover all those bases, but when you're building online, easier, more effective. The nice thing about blended, so it fits quite nicely in between that continuum of face-to-face and fully online, is that you have those moments to check in face-to-face and engage with your students. And as I said before, a little more deeply, if you can almost guarantee, because they've been given the time they need to skill up on the basic concepts, they can come to you prepared to take things a little farther, which is nice. So you're not covering the basics again and again. And the whole idea that blended learning, it's not throwing them into the deep end like online learning might, in terms of taking responsibility for their own learning. It's scaffolding them or letting them build that responsibility for their own learning, because they're doing a little bit of it at a time, and they're still checking in with you face-to-face, and they're still being held accountable face-to-face. This is probably the most, from our faculty folks anyway, the most the biggest aha moment, I should say, is that they reached more learners doing things blended delivery, blended learning, because they realized, once they sat back and thought about it and looked at what was happening online in terms of discussion and what was happening face-to-face, they may have the 5 hands go up. So this picture here, our classrooms do not look like that. You do not see every hand up. I think this was, it's in the public domain. I think they were talking about who wants to go to space or something. So all hands went up. But we don't have this in the classroom. You typically have the same handful of students answering, because a certain type of learner would take time to reflect and to compose an answer, right? Which isn't often given in that face-to-face environment. In the online, they have that time to think about what they want to post to discussions and how they want to phrase something. So they're not put on the spot. So what our faculty realized is they were getting much richer discussions of the content and from more people. So there was kind of a double bonus there, is that they, more people were participating, but then what they were saying was richer because some people needed that time. Spoke about accessibility a bit with UDL, but it really does come into play in that, in your face-to-face, usually tied to, in our case, it's a 50-minute hour. So if you have a 2-hour class, it's really only an hour 40, and everything has to be put into that hour 40. You can't do all those different points of access, right? So as a teacher, if you're doing it online, you can bring in those different points of access for students. And some, just to give you an idea, like your high quality academic resources that you're using, like your textbooks, they often already have multiple points of access for your learners and preferences. Like we've got stuff that, can be read to you in an Australian accent or an English accent at one of 3 speeds, right? So if you think about putting that online for your students to skill up before they come to you, they're getting it at their own pace, they're getting it on their own schedule, and they're getting it in the modality they want it at that particular time, right? So you've got a lot of bonuses for your own teaching there that you couldn't cover in your face-to-face class, but you can quite easily, you're not recreating everything, you're using resources that already have those different points of access to kind of complement your own content that you already have. Assessment is huge, as we all know, and the blended environment, the blended learning environment. So you're moving from, we do assessment for learning really well. We do some ongoing assessment. It's often called the formative or diagnostic assessment, where they're doing stuff, you're providing timely feedback. We do assessment for learning quite well. Of learning quite well. So that's that summative. We take that snapshot in time to know how the student is performing at that moment in time. What we tend not to do really well when it's face-to-face is assessment as learning, which is kind of a bigger deal. So that's kind of the whole student. We're not just talking about a discipline specific. We're dealing with the whole student there, where they're developing kind of their whole metacognitive skill set. And that whole idea of the lifelong learner, and they can do more in terms of connecting with peers, making sense of information, making those connections, because again, they've got, for those who need it, they've got more time. For those who need it, they have the information in different ways that make sense to them. And again, developing that sense of ownership and efficacy. Better get these right. This was kind of, so this point was a bit of, it was contentious with some folks. So a lot of, not a lot, I would say a few vocal folks at our place. So we have 450 full-time faculty, and we have about 4 times that in part-time faculty. So we're a bigger college, and I'm the only one of me on campus. So I know most of them quite well. They were thinking that blended learning was taking away from their expertise, because they were saying, the whole course in a box idea. If we move online, it's all there for the student. And I guess my pushback with that was, some of them were very heavily into publisher resources, which was already kind of a course in a box. And to me, what the blended gives, it actually showcases your subject matter expertise, because in your face-to-face time, you're diving deeper, because you can cover all the basic stuff, the concept, the basic concept stuff online. So when you're face-to-face, you're actually showcasing your own subject matter expertise and your discipline knowledge. And to me, that's what the teaching is. The teaching isn't the content. Content is everywhere and anywhere really these days. It's that context. And that's what you as subject matter experts bring, right? You bring those connections and the context of learning. And that in blended, to me, is easier than face-to-face, because face-to-face, you're spending too much time dealing with the very basic stuff. So showcasing the subject matter expertise. And most of the faculty, once you explain it, they get it. That, oh yeah, okay, I can cover that stuff that used to take me 3 face-to-face because people weren't getting it, but some people had it. I can cover that off online in 1 week. And then we can get to some really interesting activities and tasks and assessment in our face-to-face time. So that was a huge boost. That was a harder boost for some people to understand. But once that's solidified, that's huge. To understand that blended is actually showcasing your expertise in a way that face-to-face teaching probably didn't. I don't know everyone's case, but probably didn't before. And I think that's all I had. And about half an hour, so I wasn't too far off. I was going to leave this up just to kind of for discussion prompts. So that's kind of those boosts to learning and the boost to you as an educator. That's kind of what we were hoping to showcase today, and those basics around blended learning. So, I mean, we can get into